We are looking now beyond the specific content, the little details. We've used a lot of scientific model. We've only introduced a little bit of traditional medicine model. We're now going to go into systems of wisdom, how we can really see the connection of life, how this relates to our body. Our systems of wisdom and how we'll outline, we'll go systems of wisdom or knowledge. We already understand how these are different and what the advantages to both of them are. We'll look at what are great systems of wisdom that you can use. We're going to look at the 5 elements and balance in the world. This is one way to define balance from the Ayurvedic perspective. Traditional Indian medicine, they use these 5 elements quite a lot. The next one is doshas. This is how they define your individual body type. There's a lot of information on doshas inside your booklet. You'll be able to find an abundance on the web. It's great as your step to see balance as it relates to you as an individual. We're going to see how the doshas relate to diets with purpose and intention. So each diet has a different advantage, a different benefit. So we saw the raw food diet can be great for increasing cold, detoxifying, pulling things out. So it created so much pulling things out that it turned into more loose stool, cold in the spine. It was really pulling everything out. Knowledge or wisdom. So we saw that systems of knowledge are more about the content, specific scientific detail, thousands of categories. Specific systems of wisdom, next one. Systems of wisdom are more about how things unite together. How does everything work as one? And how can we see the connections? So our place within the world. So what are some great systems of wisdom? First off, they're bioqualitative systems. So what that means is, instead of biochemistry, which we're familiar with from modern science, what do the specific molecules do? In this, it's about what do the qualities do? What does cold do? Now, cold, we can go, oh, it just makes me cold. But what does that do? It makes all of my pores shrink. It decreases the secretions. It makes me go from external heat out there in the world to internal, draw into my home, draw into my mind. There's qualities that will take place with mind and the body that happen for all of these people. So we look at these qualities as a key way to understand this balance, a bioqualitative system. We use these a lot in the West, and I'm sure that you have generalizations and terms that you're familiar with from Indonesian terms as well. For if the person is cold, then they may be like, oh, I'm not talking to you. I don't want to interact with the world, yeah? I want to stay here in my thing. If the person is hot, then they're like, they're not just talking to you, but they're telling you what to do. They're out there, I want this to happen and that. You know, these qualities transcend a food, yeah, or a weather pattern. There's something that relates to all of life. Hippocrates. So if we looked back into European traditional medicine, Hippocrates was considered as the father of European medicine. He had a humoral system, 4 different humors, 4 different main body types that we could understand. It's unfortunate that his system is pretty much lost today. There's tiny bits that are written down, but written knowledge is not as good as knowledge that's been passed on from one being to another. So this system is very much lost. The next one, traditional Chinese medicine, a beautiful system to understand the connection of the world. I really advise for those that have a passion to learn more about it. It's a great system. It's very esoteric though. It's great at understanding like the energetic connections, the energy pathways inside our bodies, this alternating yin yang, it's very good at. It can be a bit challenging to combine Chinese medicine with modern scientific language. And as we're all very used to modern scientific language, Ayurveda is really ideal for that. Ayurveda, you can jump back and forth between modern scientific language, bioqualities really easily, because this system in Ayurveda is a like increases like, which means if I want to be more grounded and stable, I eat more grounded and stable foods. I spend time with grounded and stable people. It's the same system we use in modern science. It's actually the same thing, but modern science doesn't have a bioqualitative to that. So because they use the same type of like increases like, or opposites balance, therefore they can combine fairly well together. So our chapter 1 for this, Ayurveda and the 5 elements. So this is their first step to understand balance in the world. So what is Ayurveda? A lot of you might not know a lot about Ayurveda, so let's really understand what is this science and what is its purpose. The first part of the word Ayur means to preserve life in form. It's how can we preserve us as physical beings. The next part of the word Veda means knowledge or wisdom. It's the knowledge or the wisdom of how to preserve life in form. So if you have a body and you want to lengthen it in form, Ayurveda is amazing for that. Now, India has many incredible sciences to understand our place in the world. All of you will be familiar with yoga. Yoga is more associated as the science of the mind and uniting ourselves with the divine. So although we'll use different terms that may be used within yoga as well, remember that there's a slightly different purpose. This purpose of yoga is to unite the mind with the divine, self-realization. And we'll see that in chapter 3. The purpose of Ayurveda is to preserve the body. Now, in the big picture though, they're all trying to teach us that all life is connected and one. And that in order to preserve the body, we need to realize that we're one. Yoga, in order to preserve the body, we need to unite our mind with the divine and see that we're all one. So it's the science of life that shows us how to understand the world and preserve life in form. It's a vast medical system that covers everything from nutrition, environmental effects to surgery and pharmacy. A lot of people think of it as like, oh, it's just a little bit of doshas and this and that. And what we're teaching you today is like kindergarten Ayurveda. It really goes very deep. So I understand that they were doing organ transplant surgery 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years ago, they knew how to transplant one organ and put another one in. They knew the herbs to counteract the body's immune response so it wouldn't kill the organ. Amazing stuff a long time ago. A lot of our modern surgery practices come from Ayurveda, cataract surgery. It's something that we learnt from ancient Ayurvedic texts. An amazing system of medicine. Today we'll focus on 2 different systems within Ayurveda that can be used to increase our united wisdom with the environment. So we're really trying to keep this simple category systems, these qualitative systems, to mainly 2 parts. So the 5 elements. So here we have the spectrum of the 5 elements. So we've got ether, air, fire, water and earth. So this ether is like space. It's emptiness, just like we have the space up there. And then we move down into the gases, and then we move down into the fire, the transformation that's taking place on the earth. And then we have the water, and then we have the solid earth. Now this is a spectrum for life. This is like the Ayurvedic chemistry table. It's like, what are the building blocks that all of life is made up of? So we can see this to define balance. So it doesn't matter what it is. If you're doing exercise, it needs to have all 5 of these elements in it. So it needs to have the ether element, which is the spirit element, the bit that joins us together. The prayer, the meditation needs to be part of your exercise. It needs to have the air element, the breath, the movement, the change. It needs to have the fire element, the heat, the power, the intensity. It needs to have a water element, the soft, circular movements, nourishing. It needs to have an earth element, building bones and structure and form and muscles. We need to have all of those in just exercise. We could do the same with business, with a plate of food, with a body. No matter what it is, you need all 5 to create balance and living. Here we're going to focus on nutrition. So if we were looking at nutrition, the earth element for nutrition is going to be proteins and minerals. Now you've got a 5-element chart in your appendix, so you'll be able to look at this later on. It's got all the qualities of life that I could fit onto one page with all of those 5 elements. So earth element, proteins and minerals, the bits that build our bones and muscles, the bits that make us bigger and our foundation, the solidness. The water element is carbohydrates and fats. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, what? Carbohydrates? Like grains? How do they fit into the water element? But the water element is cohesion. It holds things together. You know, if you've got two pieces of water on the ground and you draw a finger between the two, they'll stay together. They'll make a little line and stay connected. That's what water does. In the family, it's the water element, the mother, the loving, nurturing energy that keeps the family together. She provides food that nourish and keep the family together. She loves and creates connection that's there. So carbohydrates do this. They connect us together. Gluten, oh my God, the protein that everyone tries to avoid, gluten's bad. It's like glue, gluten, glues things together. Too much of it, everything glues together. Yeah? So too much of that water element. Now, if we're eating processed flours and wheat 3 times a day, we're going to end up glue. So then we get allergic to that glue. So it's not that it was bad, it was beyond what we could digest. So these carbohydrates, you think of like rice. What happens when you put rice with a bit of water? It ends up gluey. It all sticks together. It's the same with oats. It ends up gluey. It all sticks together. So these carbohydrates create that cohesion, hold it together. This is where we start to see the difference between the Ayurvedic element of water and what we think of as water. So if we looked at this like a color spectrum, it's not like categories. It's actually bleeding together, where you see a little bit of one that shares qualities with the other. So if we went to this side of water just here, closer to the fire, it's more like pure water. It's cleansing, it's purifying, it's drawing things out of the body. If we go to most of the water spectrum, it's oily, it's nourishing, it's building the body up. So we need to have a lot of our water that way. I talked about remineralized water as a key element for that. The fire element for nutrition, can you guess what's going to be fire dominant nutrition? Spices. Yeah? The herbs and the spices. This is what creates the transformation inside our body. It's what enables us to properly transform those foods. Now it's important that it's not just chili. Chili was the pure taste. Yeah? We want it to have lots of herbs and spices. We don't want it to be so hot that it overpowers all the 5 elements. We want it to be a nice balance with those. A little bit of cinnamon, something that has more of the other tastes. Cinnamon has got some of the water and the earth, the sweet, heavier components that are there as well. It's not just a straight pungent. The next element, air. Air dominant nutrition. Air. You know, we all need to breathe. We start to get into more of the less form here. Yet if we started to look at, we're moving around here, a little bit of air would also be freshness. It's this thing that creates change. Fibers, leafy green. Fibers, if we eat a lot of fibrous foods and we don't digest them, it causes a lot of gas. So these fibers can correlate to the air element. And the ether element, space, is fasting. If you're not having some fasting time in your nutrition, then it's not really holistic balance. Now, I don't know of any religion on the planet that doesn't use fasting to connect with spirit. The same element in our exercise that was prayer, that was meditation, in our food is to not eat. Not eating enables us to be more connected to the divine, to this oneness nature of us. So now that does not necessarily mean we all need to fast for a month or for a week or even for a day. For some people that might be fasting between breakfast and lunch, fasting between lunch and dinner. It depends on their metabolism, their body. If they're really good at breaking things down and within an hour of every meal they're already in their fast mode, then for them that's fasting. There still might be times of the year where they spend a couple of days. But for other people, they're like, oh, 4 times a year, I need to go on a complete fast because my body's building things up all the time. So we're going to look at that now. How does that relate to body types? So we've got our first dosha that comes up here. This dosha is called Vata. We'll get more on what is a dosha. For now, we're going to think of it as a functional principle, a cycle that takes place in life. These are the raw building blocks. We're about to see the cycles. So this cycle is a separating cycle. It's built of these two, so it's very light. It's dry as well. It's more prone to deficiency because there's not much form. Our next dosha is known as Pitta. It's predominantly working with the elements of fire and water. It's about transformation and change. This dosha had a very thin body type. This dosha was still thin, but a little bit more athletic, a little bit more size to them, a little bit more muscular definition that was there. The next dosha works predominantly with water and earth. It's known as Kapha. It has a largest body type because it works with the elements that are more in form, that are more heavy. And remember, they're a cycle. They work how life is a constant cycle of building form. So Kapha in our body and our mind makes us build. If we had another child to the family, that would be a Kapha attribute. It's building another part of the family. We've brought in more form to the family. Regulating. Now I need to deal with that child. I need to feed them food. I need to make sure their digestive system's working. Fire and water. I need to work on where they're going in life, what they're transforming, and I need to try and hold them together. But eventually, after all regulating cycles, we go through a separating cycle, letting go, a dying. All of life moves through this. Death is not death, it's the beginning of a new cycle. So if someone leaves the family, even if they don't die, the child goes off to study somewhere else. That's a Vata part of life. It's a loss, it's a separation. It has an effect inside your psychology and an effect inside your body. So we're going to start to understand, what is that effect? How does it influence our system?